Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess Magazine. Hey, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. You know, this is an encore presentation to a webinar that we did on Tuesday, and we had such a turnout that everybody couldn't make it in because I didn't have enough seats. But so it's gonna be live again today. We're covering same topics, but with any live presentation, who knows which direction it might take us. And with your questions, I think we're gonna have a wonderful webinar today. A couple things I'd like to do before we get started and before I hand over control over to our guest today, Ron Morrison from PUREINFLUNCER. I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things. First, if you haven't yet checked out AutoSuccessOnline.com in the last week, it's a brand new website. You can see webinars there. You can find out about future webinars there. You can see our podcasts, our magazines, all of our different content. And then also, just Tuesday of this week, our new format for our newsletters came out. Which is going to be a much more educational and informative newsletter than what we've done in the past. I invite you to sign up for it on our website. And finally, if you haven't joined AutoSuccess webinars yet on Facebook, I invite you to do it. Search for it, request to join. It's a great place to interact with our speakers, with our AutoSuccess staff. You can suggest future topics or people you'd like to see on the webinar. But most importantly, you can interact with each other. As you try to implement these changes to your business that you learn on these webinars, you're going to have successes and failures, and I invite you to share those with each other so that we can all move down the path to doing business better a little bit quicker. Now, we are going to hold the questions until the end of the webinar. So please go ahead and type them in, though, as we go. And the way that you do that is if you're on a laptop, a desktop, or a tablet, you're going to have a pane that runs down the right side of your screen. It says go to webinar. Near the bottom, it says questions. There's a little arrow or triangle. Click on that and type in your question, hit enter, question is submitted. Please do that as we go because it'll help me with context to know, what the question was, just in case, it's not perfectly clear to Ron when I ask it to him. Now, if you are on a smartphone, it could be a little more tricky. Every one of them works differently. Android, Apple, the different Android manufacturers. There's either going to be a header, a footer, or a picture frame that goes around your screen. Somewhere in there is a question mark. Click on the question mark or touch the question mark. It's going to bring up a place for you to ask the question where you type in your question. Now, that's the simple part. The hard part sometimes is getting back to the webinar. Some devices you can swipe. Excuse me. Some devices you'll have to look for somewhere in the header, footer, or picture frame an icon that looks like a desktop flat screen monitor. Click that. It'll bring you back to the webinar. Now, if you should get kicked out of the webinar for any reason, or if you get bit, somebody walks in your office or you accidentally shut it down or whatever it is, the same link that brought you here this time, it will bring you right back. The same phone number you dialed into, if you dialed in by phone, will bring you right back in, and the same code will work. So just join us again. With all that being said, I'd like to hand the reins over to our guest today, Ron Morrison. He's the CEO of PUREINFLUNCER. Ron, my friend, please take us away.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Brian. And Brian, can you hear me just fine?
Yeah, actually, yeah, you sound perfect, Ron.
Good, glad. All right, awesome. And welcome again, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. I'm excited and happy to be here to be sharing this information with all of you. And Brian, once again, thanks for putting this together, and really appreciate the job that you guys at AutoSuccess do. Okay, so that said, let's get started because this topic is about selling more cars. And each of you that are on the webinar obviously want to get back to doing that at your respective stores. So we're going to make the most of our time here this morning, keeping in mind that we know that you want to get back to selling cars, which is our goal, right? That's what we're here to do, or motorcycles, if that might be the case for people that are participating from the motorcycle world, which I so dearly love. We're going to talk about some shifts in automotive retail today. We're going to talk web traffic. We're certainly going to talk about lead to sales rates in your respective stores. We're going to explore this concept of the engaged visitor. Then we're going to go to a lab, and we're going to go look at the impact that conversion has on your sales, your profits. We're going to talk about influencing those engaged visitors. We'll explore a conversion platform. Of course, a little bit full disclosure, we're certainly going to explore PUREINFLUNCER's platform up front as well. And then we're going to do that by introducing our product called MYOFFER, and then we'll open up for some Q&A. So with that said, let's rock and roll. Goal. Number one, the goal of this webinar is to help you sell more cars. And the first goal Your goal is to simply sell more cars by converting more of the quality website traffic that you already have. Many of you have probably already read many of the trends. We've seen it in various magazines, certainly in AutoSuccess magazine as well, where dealers are talking about moving away from the expensive, sort of unaccountable way of driving more traffic and leveraging the traffic that they already have to converting more of that traffic, right? So of course, that's our second goal, help everybody here on the call get a stronger appreciation for driving more quality conversions from all of the website traffic that you already have on your website. So when you talk about conversion, at least in our industry, oftentimes people say, okay, well, what do you mean by a conversion? What's a conversion? A conversion could be, of course, a lead form submission, a phone call, a chat box, texts, social shares, even map prints, depending on your campaign objective, could be considered a conversion. For example, let's say that you started a satellite express lube for one of your dealerships, and maybe that satellite express lube is across town a little bit. You might want to then run a campaign that not only promotes that new location, but also you would measure the effectiveness of that campaign by people printing out maps to your new location. So in that context, you might even consider map prints a conversion. Of course, there's a lot more things you could use to consider conversion. Today, we're going to talk about this one. We're going to talk about lead form submissions. That's what we're going to focus on. So when we talk about conversions in this webinar, what we're talking about, lead form submissions from your website. So there's been some undeniable shifts in the automotive retail landscape over the last 12 to 18 months. What are those shifts? First of all, in our industry, at least with automotive retail, we're a mobile-first industry. What we mean by that is tablets and smartphones rule with respect to searching for vehicles, learning about information, looking at reviews, communicating back and forth with you and your dealership, submitting leads, all those things. We're a mobile-first environment. The other thing that's dramatically different is Google's right move. They made a correct move in getting rid of that paid search ad units that were forever on the right rail. Google saw how people behaved today, not only in automotive retail, but throughout their ecosystem. And what they realized was that the user, from a user experience, would be better served with ad units at the top and or at the bottom, and then organic content in the middle. And subsequently, they got rid of the right rail. So how people behave today in terms of what they're looking for, both on tablet and mobile, Google knew about it well in advance, and they got rid of what was a very profitable strategy for them in terms of that right rail, and they got rid of that. So again, big shift in automotive retail. And then, of course, how people find us in the showroom. This is a picture of a 2015 Cox Automotive study where they shared some information that at that time, and I would imagine not even now, is rather earth-shattering. They talked about how the internet continues to be the top source for people shopping for a new vehicle. No surprise to anybody, certainly not to anybody on this webinar, that the internet is used for shopping. But what was a huge surprise, particularly for me at that time, and for many dealers that found this study, was that the internet is the most effective source leading somebody to your showroom. So very different than just using the internet to shop like they used to in the past. Today they use the internet to decide where they're going to go visit. 37% of the internet, 37% of influence comes from the internet, even more so than prior experience with your dealership. Translate that. What that means is what someone sees on your website or on a third-party site or in Google or on reviews will dictate where they go. As a matter of fact, 37%, dramatically more than direct mail, television, newspaper, radio, print, all combined in terms of trying to influence where somebody goes to get their next vehicle. So that's very different today. And then, of course, Google put out a study last year, this 2016 online automotive shopper study. Great study. I strongly recommend that you review it. I'll give you the link for it here at the end of this webinar. But it talked about sort of these micro moments and where should I buy moments, why should I buy a moment, what should I buy a moment. And as you read through that article or you read through that study, after you've read it a couple times, you really get the gist of what Google is trying to tell us, which is when someone wants to buy a new vehicle, they're going to find your website whether you like it or not. The only way they're not going to find you is if you turn your site off. But because of the way devices work today, and because of the way, for example, Google and Yahoo and Bing and those search engines work today, it's made it so easy for consumers to find all of the information they want without experiencing the sort of search engine fatigue that they used to long ago, back in 2016 or 15, for example. Being funny. But today, buyers are going to find you online whether you like it or not. They're going to find your store, and which is why many of us have 8, 10, 15, 20, 30,000 unique visitors on our website. The vast majority of every automotive dealer's website is organic. We also know not only is the majority of your traffic on your site organic, but we also know when it comes to conversion, organic traffic converts at a higher rate than paid search traffic does. And organic traffic has a higher lead to sales rate than paid traffic does. So there's all of that opportunity, and Google continues to tell us that these shoppers are going to find us whether you like it or not. So we need to be prepared for managing that traffic when it's online. So the problem isn't traffic. Conversion, not traffic, is our challenge. I often jokingly say, for example, can you imagine a review that says, buying a car from your dealership was great, except that you were so difficult to find on the internet? No person has ever said that. There's not a store in the country that has a negative review that says, I couldn't find you, or you were problematic to find online. That's not our issue. Our issue is converting the traffic that does in fact find us, right? So each of the stores throughout the country, all of you online, have more traffic online than you could handle in terms of delivering vehicles. Yes, it is true that there are some dealerships that need more website traffic. Maybe you've got a brand new dealership. Maybe you've just went through a buy sell. Maybe you had an internet, a search engine marketing vendor that was doing something that was less than productive, so subsequently you need more traffic. But that's rare. That's not the norm, right? What most stores need is quality traffic. Then, of course, there's some stores that need more leads, and the reality is what they need is not just more leads, but they need quality leads. And then all dealerships need a higher lead to sales rate. As we know, the industry averages 10%, right? So 10% typically of the leads that we get from our website convert to a sale. And that number is just average. And we need to make sure that we think beyond average. We need to be looking at converting traffic in terms of 12, 15, 20, 25, and 30%. We need to get greater wins for our BDC, for our internet department, and have them chasing down leads that close at 20 and 30%, rather than chasing down leads that are simply average and closing at 10%, right? So that's one of the major focuses of this webinar, is to talk about driving leads that close at a much higher rate. So how do we do that? How do we increase website lead sales rates? Who's responsible for the lead to sales rate at your organization? Who's ultimately responsible for that? When I do a live webinar, or seminar rather, and talk to groups of people, all kinds of responses come up. Well, it's the internet manager's responsibility. It's our vendor's responsibility. It's our sales manager's responsibility. It's our dealer principal. Lots of different options. I will tell you that the number one person who should be ultimately responsible for your lead to sales rate is your general manager, first and foremost. Why? Your general manager is dictating the vision, the course, and the strategy for your overall marketing strategy and the tactics that comprise that strategy. Additionally, your general manager is the person who holds the purse strings, the budget for that strategy. So the reason for driving any advertising strategy or any search engine marketing tactic or any of that, the reason for that is to sell more cars. So if that's the reason, if that's the metric, then the general manager is responsible for how many cars we're selling from the search engine marketing or website traffic strategy that he or she has put in place, right? So the general manager should set an internet sales volume and an internet sales rate monthly objective. So oftentimes a GM says, hey, our target today is, or this month is 80 units, or 280 units, or 380 units, whatever that is. Well, the general manager should also say, here's our target for what happens from our website. Our target from our website is 7 units, is 50 units, whatever that number is. The general manager needs to declare what that target is, and then set that sales rate monthly objective and hold her managers accountable to that objective, just like she would in terms of the entire dealership, right? So the general manager, first and foremost, internet sales volume, internet sales rate, monthly objective. And then the GM should make sure that there's a clean and effective, measurable lead to sales response strategy. So lead to response sales strategy. That means as a GM, I want to see what it is that we do to respond to a lead, what processes are in place, what are the emails, what are the phone calls, what are the timing, what's the cadence, what is our accountability to that process? Can we measure it? Is that process effective? And is it clean? Can I plug in a new person and that person can just act on that process and get essentially the same results? Now, if your store doesn't have a strong lead to sales response strategy, which by the way is one of the first things we ask as a partner when our clients say, hey, great, we saw your product, we really want to plug that on. What we say is, well, let's talk about your lead to sales response strategy first. What is that? Are you confident in it? Is it measurable? So that when you do plug in this tool, you can see immediate incremental gain, right? So if you don't have one, I strongly encourage you to reach out to David Kane, maybe Gary May, the PCG group. There are a lot of organizations out there that can help you put in a strong lead to sales response strategy for your store. Then, of course, the other thing the GM needs to do is identify poor performing campaigns. Look for opportunity costs. What I mean by that is a poor performing campaign, let's say, for example, a campaign that drives a 7% lead to sales rate or a 10% lead to sales rate. What that means is as that internet department or that BDC chases down those opportunities, their opportunity cost is in imbalance because they're spending a lot of time chasing down non-responsive leads, leads that ultimately don't close, etc. So a 10% response rate essentially is a 90% failure rate, right? 90% of the day, that internet department is not getting enough wins. So you want to consider the opportunity costs and give that internet department leads that close at a much higher ratio, changing the lead mix, giving that department leads that have a 20 and 25, 30% probability of close rather than a 10%. And the way to do that, the simplest way to do that, is to move away from the very old and outdated and meaningless metrics that are, for example, click-through rates, cost per clicks, bounce rates, etc., and move to the more new, relevant metrics. And again, this is where the PCG group really did our industry a favor when Brian Posh put out a paper around these new visitor engagement metrics. The metrics are, for example, CPE, cost per engagement, engagement per session, 0 engagements per page. Which page do you have on your website that have absolutely no engagement whatsoever? And do you want to increase engagement there? Are you driving traffic, or is there inventory or service product there that you want to market and drive, but yet the engagement on that page is so low? And then, of course, the form rate, completion rate, right? So all of these things are new metrics that matter most when it comes to conversion. Those other metrics are dated, and they really don't matter with respect to conversion. For example, oftentimes people will say, geez, I moved vendors and now my click-through rate is so much higher. Higher compared to what, right? Higher compared to the last time when you were only looking at 15% of the overall populace. What we mean by that is a click-through rate, in the US at least, there are only 15% of the people that intentionally click a banner ad or click an ad unit online. Only 15%. Forget mobile, which has a lot of accidental clicks from sort of fat finger clicking, etc. By the way, I'm one of the people that probably definitely don't click on a banner intentionally, and probably some of you are that way because we don't want to be taken away from what we're doing. We don't want to be distracted, or we don't want something to show up and pop up on us later that we were not expecting. So oftentimes people have this negative sort of relationship with what they need to click. And the reality is there's only 15% of the people that click a banner intentionally. So think about it. Of all the cars that you did sell and all the cars that you could sell, there's only 15% of those people that will intentionally click an ad unit. So that means that CTR rate is meaningless. If you had a vendor that had the best CTR rate in the world, if they were 100% perfect, they would only represent 15% of the total populace in your market. So that's really not a real metric, right? Cost per click, also that's sort of this, again, it falls back to how many people are actually going to go click it. Your bounce rates, all of those things have to do with your website speed, the content on your website, the pricing and inventory of your vehicles. All those things have greater impact than those older metrics. So I would encourage you to use these more new metrics so that you can focus on converting the traffic that's on your website rather than just trying to drive more traffic to your site. And then, of course, use conversion tools. I would strongly encourage you to use those conversion tools. Yes, shamelessly, we're selling one too, right? But the reality is it's going to help you. It's like hiring a hitting coach when you need to hit better in baseball. It's like hiring a sales trainer for incoming phone calls and you need to do better in that regard. It's like putting a better CRM tool. Let's say you had an outdated tool and you went to eLead and you got a much better tool. Well, these are tools that are going to help you be better at your overall objective, which is selling more cars. So I would strongly encourage that you add conversion tools so that you have more engaged, more engaged leads, quality leads, rather than just more leads. And there are many vendors, many ways to do that. You can use a conversion accelerator, a conversion platform. You can change your website vendor. There are many things you can do to focus on conversion. But keep in mind, you already have more traffic than you know what to do with. So let's focus and remain focused on conversion moving forward in 2017 and 18 and forward. So we talk about converting an engaged visitor. What's an engaged visitor exactly? An engaged visitor is somebody who spends quality time reviewing one or more of your vehicles or reviewing one or more of your service offers. Maybe they've returned to your website multiple times within the last day, within the last week, or within the last month. They have this behavior that is strongly indicative of somebody that wants to buy a vehicle, and they haven't yet converted to a lead on your website. That's what we mean when we're talking about an engaged visitor. That's generally when you hear these vendors talk about engaged visitors, that's what we're talking about. Somebody that exhibits strong buying intent on your site, however, they haven't yet converted to a lead, right? So, for example, we tend to leverage a technology that uses lots of algorithms very similar to what Google does, right? So let's think about this for a second. When you look at Google or Yahoo or any one of the search engines, they look at that individual's behavior online. The search terms is one of them, where they've been, the types of pages they're browsing, the content they're consuming, all of the time they invest in one or more pages, one or more topics, etc. And Google accumulates all of that information, and then their algorithm then places any number of retargeting ads or ad units in the bid process to then have an ad or have a retargeting ad show up to that engaged buyer. So that's what Google does. And many conversion platforms, specifically ours, does the same thing, but we do it on your website. So we look at things like session duration, scroll depth on the VDP, which model did they start with, how much time have they been on your site, how much time have they been away from your site within a day, within a week, within a month. Let's look at the mobile session versus the paid session. All of these things contribute to the algorithm to help identify what we refer to as an engaged visitor. And if you had an engaged visitor, what would you want to do with that person, right? For example, let's say you're standing in line at Starbucks and you're in a long line, you work at a dealership, and you happen to look at somebody sitting at one of the tables, and over their shoulder, you see that they're looking on their laptop, they're looking at your website, so you've got this little grin on your face, you're waiting to get coffee, and you can see that they're scrolling up and down looking at the inventory on your dealership's website, right? It's kind of cool. And then you see this. You see them do what they normally do, which is they leave your website right in front of your eyes, and they open another tab, and they begin looking at your competitor's website, right? They search for it, they're looking at it, and you actually see that happen. And maybe you actually see them go from the competitor's website either to another site or back to yours, etc. Think about what you would do. Most of you on this call would probably pull your business card out, maybe subtly interrupt them. You might even buy that guy a cup of coffee and just say, hey, by the way, here's my name. I work for the store you were checking out, and how can I help you? Give me a call. Let me see. If you didn't do that, you'd at least want to. You'd at least want to cause them to take some action toward your direction. That's what a conversion platform can do for you. It can do it for you at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're sound asleep and there's an engaged buyer who's indecisive about what they want to do, where they want to go. Give them a subtle nudge, no different than you would if you saw it. And how many people on your website are engaged? Well, on every dealer site that we measure, there's over 20% on average of the traffic that's on your website are what we refer to as engaged visitors. People that have sufficient amount of time on one or more products, people that have returned multiple times to that very same product, people that were off that dealer's website for a few minutes, maybe a few hours within the same 1 or 2 or 3 day period. So clearly indicative of their buying behavior, no different than the person that was sitting in Starbucks, bouncing back and forth from one website to the next. And so we know that every website has about 20% of engaged visitors. Well, let's break that 20% engagement number down to what happens in a dealership typically today, right? So let's say we're talking about a dealership that has 10,000 monthly unique visitors. Well, we know that if they have 10,000 monthly unique visitors, then about 20% of them are engaged, or what we call in-market buyers, not in-market shoppers, in-market buyers. These are people that are going to buy from your store, your competitor store, off-brand, third-party, maybe even an independent private seller, but 20% of that traffic is visiting your page and a lot of other pages in your market, and they're ultimately going to buy within the next 1 to 30 days. Think about that. Somebody that was on your competitor's site, on a third-party site, on your site, and let's say they ultimately bought from your competitor. They bought from them, but they were on your site either before or during, but they did buy from your competition, right? So 20% of that traffic is going to buy from somebody in your market. Well, typically, a website converts between 1.5% to 3%. We see the number closer to 2% when we look at true, genuine metrics. So 2% of those monthly unique conversions means that a dealership that had 10,000 unique visitors has 200 leads that came directly from their website. And with a 10% lead to sales rate, right, 10% lead to sales rate, that means that dealership sold 20 units. Cool. 10,000 unique visitors, sold 20 cars. Maybe that dealership can feel good about that. Maybe they're moving north in terms of performance, and they go, okay, cool, that's great. But let's look at what that really means. That really means that store only sold 1% of the engaged buyers that visited their website. So the people that wanted to buy a car in the market that had come to your website in this scenario, only 1% of them were sold by that particular dealership. And that's a really low number. We can all do better than that if we focus on converting more of the visitors, more of these 2,000 people, into leads, right? And so how do we do that? Well, we know what people are doing because Google tells us what they're doing. Google tells us a lot. There's this thing that vendors use today, is don't just think with Google, which is great, right? Think with Google, think with Google, think with Google. We hear it from Google, we hear it from their vendors, we hear it from their partners, you even hear it from us. But we take it a step further. Don't just think with them, believe what Google is telling us about online automotive shopper behavior today. It is vastly different than the yesteryears of 2015, dramatically different. How people shop today is very, very, very different than how they shopped 24 months ago. So we should believe Google, and believe Google when they say that engaged visitor is shopping your site, is shopping the OEM, the competitor, third parties, other brands, other competitors, and they're doing so with ease that they've never had before. They're informing themselves with lots of information, arming themselves with lots of pricing, invoicing, reviews. All of those things are what people do today, and they do it in a matter of minutes, which even a couple of years ago took them a half an hour, in many cases an hour. Today they can browse through so much information so quickly because of the way the devices work, and more specifically because of the way browsers work. So believe Google about how simple it is and how people shop today. So if we know that they're visiting multiple sites, and if we know that conversion is the key, well, then it's important that you memorize this conversion rule. I'd strongly encourage you to post this up in your internet department, in front of your GM. Share this rule with your search engine marketing vendor, right? And here's the rule. Any 2% increase in conversion rate of engaged visitors sells more cars than any 20% increase in quality website traffic. So where's the key phrase in this rule? The key phrase in this rule is sells more cars. That's what your marketing tactics and your overall strategy has to be about. If your strategy is about driving more traffic, you're not necessarily going to sell any more cars. You already have more traffic than you know what to do with. Driving more traffic doesn't necessarily drive more car sales at the rate we would all like. It's converting. And the good news is we only need small increases in conversion rate to outperform driving a lot of quality website traffic. So the rule, any 2% increase in conversion rate of engaged visitors sells more cars than any 20% increase in quality website traffic, right? So we're talking about traffic versus engaged visitors. Your site has thousands of unique visitors. There's not as many of those visitors when you exclude all the bots, right? All the machine traffic and nefarious traffic. And there's fewer still that are what we call highly engaged visitors, right? So it's important to remember that we're talking about working with those highly engaged visitors, not necessarily all of the traffic that's on your website. So let's go see some proof of this. Let's go to what we call in this webinar the conversion lab, right? So our conversion lab is this thing right here, and it's a website. As a matter of fact, if you want to use this tool to plug in your own numbers, you are strongly encouraged to do so. You can get there by simply going to PUREINFLUNCER.com, and then there's a little link up in the upper right corner called Proof, and you can plug in your own numbers. You can email your numbers to yourself, and then you'll actually have a very clean sheet that you can actually sit down and share with either your GM, your dealer principal, your internet manager, your search engine marketing vendor. But this can give you a strong guide as to where you want to direct your resources, leveraging what my friend Sean Stapleton says, which is asking for the 2017 stuff, right? Where do you want to drive your dollars and attention in the way that people behave today in 2017? So again, here's a rule, and let's take a look at it. We can compare this rule in terms of how it impacts your dealership in cost and how it impacts your dealership in terms of opportunities. So let's start with cost. Let's say, for example, that you're a dealership. I'm going to focus right here on the left side of these two columns. Let's say that you're a dealership that has 10,000 unique monthly visitors. And let's say that your cost per click happens to be in your store or in your market, let's just, for round numbers, just say $3. And of course, you can adjust these numbers to match your reality. And let's say you're considering adding $3,000 to your paid search budget. Or let's say you had none and you want to increase it to $3,000 and start with $3,000, right? So you've got a budget, you're going to either increase your current spend, or maybe you just want to start a spend in general, and you say, okay, cool, I'm going to spend $3,000. And let's give your website the benefit of the doubt and move it at the high end of the conversion spectrum of 3%. So with these numbers, if you're spending $3,000 and you're getting $3 per click and your conversion rate is 3%, what that means is you're going to ultimately drive another $1,000 in new traffic. Truthfully, some of that new traffic, some of those people that are clicking on this paid search ad unit that you just deployed are being cannibalized from your organic traffic, meaning you're putting an ad unit in front of somebody that was searching for a car that would have happily clicked your organic unit, particularly those people that have strong organic search strategies where you come up first anyway, right? So some of this is cannibalization, but let's just assume that it was all rich, right? Here it is, 1,000. And at a 3% conversion rate, that means you've got 30 leads. With the industry standard 10% conversion, that means 3 deals came out of this $3,000 spend at a cost per unit of $1,000. Plug your own numbers in and see what your cost per unit is. Strongly encourage you to do that. And then flip over to this side of the column and consider that 2% rule. Here it is. So we know 20% of your traffic, of 20% of this 10,000 number, is highly engaged. What happens if you had a conversion platform that just won 2% of that? All we want to do is get 2% of that number. That's all we want to do. And let's say you spent $1,000 instead of $3,000. Well, let's take a look. Now, with getting 2%, instead of just 30 leads, you've got 40 leads. These leads close at 20%, 25%, 30% or higher because they're highly engaged shoppers. So what happens is now you take that 40 at a 20% close rate, and now you've got 8 units. 8 units instead of 3 units at $125 per copy instead of $1,000 per copy. And again, plug your own numbers in here, and you can experiment with a conversion rate or winning percentage of 2,000. Oftentimes our clients are winning 5% of that 2,000 number. And it's a huge jump in opportunity. A huge jump in opportunity in terms of, and also in saving costs. Then of course, we can look at this from the comparing the opportunity section. So again, let's compare. On the left side, we've got 10,000 unique visitors. On the right side, so this says with PUREINFLUNCER, and again, it can be anyone's conversion platform if they have a good one. Here we're talking about ours, right? So 10,000 unique visitors, 20% of those are engaged shoppers. Here's your 3% conversion rate. And so those are the leads that you're going to get with or without a conversion platform, right? So you're going to get those leads anyway because your website closes at 3%. However, there's 1,700 in this case of these leads that are unconverted, right? We didn't do anything with it. However, if you put in a conversion solution where you're focused on winning some of that 2,000, now what you're going to do is you're going to pick up 2% of that 2,000 number, and there it is, 40 new units, right? So instead of having 300 leads, you've got 340 leads. Typical 10% lead to sales rate means that now you're going to have 30 deals versus 34 deals. At a $2,000 front and back average gross, you can either gross 60 grand or you can gross $68,000. Choice is yours. We kind of know which side of the column you'd like to choose. However, it gets a lot better. Many of our clients, many dealers across the country who are beginning to focus on conversion get the luxury of not having to focus on driving and spending so much money to drive traffic. Let me repeat that. When you start focusing on conversion, you then get the luxury of not having to spend or depend on so much traffic. Let's see it in action. Let's leave all of this the same, and let's say now we're not spending so much to drive traffic, and our monthly unique visitors have gone from 10,000 to 9,000. Well, let's take a look at what that does. Well, we still outperform. You still outperform even with less traffic. As a matter of fact, even with 20% less traffic, you still outperform. So many of our stores have said, wait a minute, I can focus on conversion and keep a lot of the money that I'm spending in driving traffic in my pocket, or I can redirect it toward a better experience for the dealership, meaning a better experience when customers come into the store, or I can redirect it toward training, or I can redirect it toward other facilities or inventory or other, whatever it is. But they're saying, listen, I don't have to spend more money any longer in driving traffic, because what we do is we focus on converting all of that quality traffic that passes our website on a regular basis every single month, right? So I would strongly encourage you to go through, plug in your numbers, email yourself your own results, sit with your dealer principal, sit with a general manager, sit with your internet department or your search engine vendor and say, here's kind of what we're looking at, and get some real numbers for yourself. So that's our lab. Let's just jump back into our presentation and move forward. So now we know that we want to win more of our highly engaged visitors. How do we influence them? What is it that we can do, right? How should your conversion platform influence those visitors? And we would submit to you, that I would submit to you, that you should do it algorithmically, right? You can't do it based on time, how much time they spend on your site. You can't do it based on how many visits, right? 3 visits in a week are dramatically different in terms of intention from 3 visits in a month. So you can't simply throw a very simple tool that says, hey, I want to measure time or measure visits, because there's a lot more in terms of behavior online that goes into identifying a highly engaged visitor. So one way to influence, of course, or some of the things that you should consider when you're influencing, is we want to do a timely pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt, many of us are familiar with what that is in terms of sales training on the phone, sales training on the lot, where we want to do a pattern interrupt, where we want to slow that customer or slow that opportunity down just for a second so that we can convey a very important message to move them forward, right? So we want to do a pattern interrupt. So what we do, of course, is do a digital interrupt, digital pattern interrupt, or a virtual pattern interrupt as it's sometimes called, meaning the customer shopping online, they didn't all see an offer, they didn't see that offer immediately, they didn't get the incentive immediately, but we serve them up something timely at the right moment to get them over the hump, to nudge them. Think about that Starbucks visitor, right? So, or that Starbucks shopper online. At the right moment, you want to be able to, if you could, influence them to consider you more strongly than the other people that they were shopping. And then, of course, very important to remember that we're a mobile-first world, right? So we need to make sure, or you need to make sure that if you're going to use a strategy to convert more traffic and you're going to use an algorithmic strategy to do so, make sure that it's represented cleanly and beautifully in a mobile environment, because that's where the majority of your shoppers are. They're online. So we want to make sure that everything looks clean and behaves first in a mobile environment more so than on your website. Then, of course, you want to serve up messaging in terms of a virtual pattern interrupt. You want to do it in a way that's unique to your market, right? So, for example, what you're looking at here is an incentive that shows up, and anybody near, in this case, McCluskey Chevrolet, anybody in that market knows exactly what that bridge is. If some of you are in Cincinnati, Ohio, you know exactly what that bridge is. And so what that does, it does an elegant virtual pattern interrupt. It causes them to go, oh, let me look. That's familiar to me. Let me look at it. And when they do that, they cannot help but consume this offer. They're forced to digest the message. It's a strategy that television uses. It's a strategy that world-class print uses. It's capture their attention, and if you do so elegantly, they're going to be forced to consume this message, right? And so if it was timely and it was mobile and it's unique to your market, that's great. And of course, it has to be credible. It has to be a message, and it has to be in a manner that makes it very believable and non-cheesy, if you will, to that visitor. Because if it is credible, it doesn't appear too much as an interruption. If it is credible, it's something I want to consume. But more importantly, if it is credible, I take you up on it, right? Or our engaged visitor takes you up on it. So, for example, let's assume I'm one of those people, and I'm cruising around on this VDP, and maybe I've been to the site multiple times. Maybe I've been to another competitor multiple times, and then all of a sudden this happens, right? Well, cool. Regardless of what it says, the interesting thing is, hey, I had not seen this offer before. This just presented to me, and I've been shopping for a day or shopping for a couple of days. You serve this offer up, and I go, hey, you know what? Cool. All right, I'm in. Here we go. Let's rock and roll. And maybe it's not something I saw on a competitor site, but it's just at the right time to get me over the hump to submit a lead, which is something I had not yet done naturally on the website, right? So that's one strategy. Another strategy, of course, maybe I'm scrolling around on an SRP. Maybe it's my first visit. I'm spending a lot of quality time. I've looked at multiple vehicles. I haven't yet submitted a lead, and all of a sudden this happens. You know, get your $250 off coupon on any new Toyota. The important thing has to be, of course, around the dynamism, right? So what I mean by that is it must be a dynamic offer that not only is virtual, but one that can change in real time on the fly for you based on what you want it to do. So, for example, a little bit of lab work. There are other platforms out there. For example, our platform gives somebody the ability to change the image, change the background, change the logo, literally change the font on the message, change what it says. I don't want it to say $250 off. I can literally change it in 2 seconds to make it be $500 off. I can change the color of the font. I can choose all of that. I can choose, you know, if I want to limit it by make, by model, by year, by URL, start date, etc. All of those things so that this conversion strategy is then dynamic and unique to that particular visitor in that circumstance. Oftentimes, when we share this, you know, someone will say, "Well, geez, that looks to me just like a pop-up." Huge difference. You certainly could certainly make the case that a bus is a simple way of transportation and a motorcycle is another way of transportation, but they're not identical at all. What you're looking at here is no different than what Google does, right? Or the search engines. Yes, Google, based on your behavior, based on many elements within their algorithm, determine whether or not they want to serve up or pop up, however you call it, serve up a retargeting banner in your browser to interrupt your ESPN sports experience. Google, based on what you're searching for and looking for, maybe in something you're studying or what have you, may choose to serve up an ad unit based on something either you're looking for or you had previously looked for. So they're popping up content either in an ad unit or a retargeting unit, or they're serving up. Same concept here. The difference is we're serving it up to your most rich audience, that 20% of the populace in your market that is going to buy. Guess where they are? They're not on Google, they're on your website. So all the more reason to try to convert them, particularly if they haven't naturally converted already. So that's sort of that look. Now, there are many vendors in the industry that can help you focus on conversion strategies, on lead to sale strategies, on giving you a conversion platform. For example, Entice has a conversion platform. Gary May does a great job at coming in your store and helping you get the most out of all the traffic that you have, not only on your website, but that's your CRM tool, on your phone, etc. Kane Automotive, PCG Group can help you explore more real, current, sort of key process indicators around conversion strategies. All of these groups can help you drive more conversion from your site. When it's the MYOFFER platform, which you just took a glance at from PUREINFLUNCER, these are the kinds of things that we do. Obviously we have a fully customizable plug-and-play solution that once you plug it in, you're able to measure your traffic, measure conversion, how many times you're serving up offers, the leads that you're getting daily, etc., all of that kind of stuff. It's a dynamic asset library where all the assets are contained within that environment. A very strong site learning behavior. As you saw moments ago, you can pick and choose and convert an offer and change message text and parameters literally on the fly within a matter of seconds. You customizable layouts, etc. What we do, of course, is you probably got the idea when you saw us in lab that we're talking about $1,000. That's generally what our conversion platform costs. It costs $750 for us to set up all the creative, do all the fine tuning to your website, get it installed, and it's just $995 a month. Contrast that to your $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month search engine marketing budget. By the way, the good news is for people on this webinar, if you're interested, you're getting an $895 a month price. You get a $100 break for the people that are on this webinar, which is great. And of course, you get all the detailed reporting or what have you. If anybody wants to take a deeper look at our platform, happy to show it to you in about 10 or 15 minutes online, just privately for you in your store, and we can work through it. And again, this is a platform that plug and plays into retail franchise, pre-owned, pay here, buy here, pay here, motorcycle shops, whatever you might be, and you need to convert more traffic, this platform can help you do that very simply. So I've got some resources for you and then some homework for you. Here's some suggested resources I recommend. Here we go. We're shamelessly promoting one of our blogs, the 98% That's Terrible blog. This is a blog that talks more about why you and your organization should focus more on conversion and less on driving traffic. I mentioned Google's car buying process study. Strongly recommend that you read that study. Download it. You can download it from this link. Oftentimes when we talk about pop-ups and incentives, people in the audience say, wait a minute, Google will penalize my website if I have a pop-up. That could not be further than the truth. First of all, when you look at Google's rules and how they deployed it, it only applies to mobile. And it's around improving the user's mobile experience. It has nothing to do with your desktop. And then when it comes to mobile, it only talks about those persistent, immediate pop-ups that Google's crawlers find when it pops up immediately on a page load. It doesn't talk about an algorithm pop-up that, in many cases for our clients, don't even exist on the home page. So which, by the way, there's another reason you want a more intelligent conversion platform so that it can adhere and work seamlessly within the Google pop-up rules. And then strong pitch, strong recommendation for the PCG engagement project. I strongly recommend you reading that Vista Dash report, which talks a lot about new metrics, zero engagement per page, cost per engagement, those sorts of things. You'll get a lot of reading that from the PCG group. So with that, I promised some homework to improve your existing conversion rate. Here's what it is. First of all, run to your CRM tool. Hopefully you have one. and generate a lead source close report for the last 90 days. So, make a note to yourself that the next thing you're going to go do is run that lead to source close report over the last 90 days. And then what you want to do is you want to identify all the sources that you have with less than 7% close ratio over 90 days. So let's say you've got source ABC, right? And it's had 7% or less for the last 90 days. I'd strongly recommend really considering what you want to do with that particular source, even if it's free. Because remember, there's an opportunity cost for your internet department and your BDC, right? And what we want to do ultimately is have an internet department or BDC or know that our internet efforts are driving a 20 and 25% conversion rate overall rather than a 7 and 10%. Use the opportunity cost calculator. Go to that calculator, plug in your own numbers, play around with numbers that vendors have given you. Use that tool to make sure you understand before you spend any more money, or if you want to spend less, where you should put some focus and emphasis on. Review your findings with your management team and take action on that. And lastly, again, strongly recommend that you learn the new metrics that matter, which are around conversion and engagement, and move away from the very dated metrics around cost per click, click-through rates, and those sorts of things. So with that, I want to open up to a discussion. Let's go ahead and chat. Happy to talk with everybody.
All right, hey everybody, this is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess. I actually was at the Automotive Engagement Conference last week, June 1st, up in Chicago, and in the PCG study that Ron was talking about, I actually saw Brian Pash shared that, and it was really fascinating. I mean, it's a whole new set of metrics that are much more relevant, I think, than a lot of the ones that we saw. Like just a little something quick I'll share with you is bounce rate. They made the point that is a bounce a good thing or a bad thing? If somebody comes to your website and 30 seconds later they leave without going to another page, maybe they found what they were looking for. Or what if they stick around for a minute and a half? Maybe they couldn't find what they were looking for. So maybe they click on 5 things because they couldn't find what they were looking for. So a lot of the metrics that we have been, really hanging our hat on, maybe they're meaningless and maybe they've been pointing us in the wrong direction. So I'm with Ron. Check out that study. It's pretty valuable. So right now we're going to jump into our questions. If you haven't typed in your questions yet, please do. We went over that at the beginning. Please type them into the question function on the screen. And Ron, our first question here today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera on as well. Our first question is, why not hit every visitor with a pop-up to maximize effectiveness?
Okay, we get that a lot. And let's remember what one of the goals is to improve the overall lead to sales rate. What we want to do is sell more cars, not get more leads. Matter of fact, we often tell dealers, what you need is fewer traffic and fewer leads. You just need more of the right leads. And what happens is if we just serve up an offer to everyone, then we're losing the opportunity cost battle with our internet department and our BDC. The reason is now they've got dozens more, if not hundreds more leads to chase down in their process. Remember, the process has to be repeatable and measurable. So now they've got to go act on this process with a lead that has a very low likelihood of buying a car for the next 30 days, 60 days, maybe even 90 days. So the challenge with serving up an offer to everyone, although it makes a little bit of sense that you're trying to convert more traffic, but now you're introducing into your internet department non-performing or very low-performing leads with respect to lead to sales rate. So the right strategy is to identify that person that needs that nudge, that person that hasn't submitted a lead, they're clearly engaged based on what the algorithmic rules are, and then we want to serve up a nudge to kind of get them over the hump. It's important to remember that a lot of times that engaged person, that engaged visitor, started their shopping on your competitor's website. And that's something that a lot of vendors don't talk to us about. A lot of the traffic that you have started on one or more of your other vendors' sites. And then what did they do? They behaved just like you did. They found a $35,000 car. It looked like they wanted to look. It had all the features that they had, that they wanted, and then there was price on it. And guess what they did with that price? They decided to shop other stores, including yours, to compare price and features. And so they end up spending a lot of time. Maybe they live in that market, and they live closer to that dealer and not to yours, and they're spending a lot of time, and they're searching through yours just to make sure that they haven't missed anything. Well, that would be the right time if you can identify that behavior to serve up an offer that says, hey, here's why you want to choose us. So that's why we don't serve it to everyone, and that's why you want an algorithm that can ferret, if you will, that identify that engaged behavior.
All right. Hi, Maria. Glad to see you on another webinar. Absolutely. If you'd like to share this with your GM, we will have a recorded version of this that you can share. Just shoot me an email, and I'll get it to Ron, and he'll be able to share that with you. Our next question. I was told that digital disruption as far as pop-ups are annoying, and that best practice is to stop using dynamic even on our own website, for example, chat boxes. Thoughts?
Right. So yeah, absolutely. There's nothing we can do from an advertising standpoint, and let's be honest about this, that isn't interruptive. Right? Everything that we do from an advertising standpoint, by definition, is interrupting that other person. It's television commercial, we're going to interrupt it. If it's a radio spot, we're interrupting it. If it's a piece of mail in their mailbox, we're interrupting it. If it's an email in their inbox, we're interrupting it. We're happy with doing all of the interruption stuff, except the stuff that maybe feels funky to us, like a pop-up. It's no different of an interruption than any other interruption. What the big difference for that user that is engaged, especially that user that, like many people today, are trying to deliberate, hey, do I want to go spend $38,200 there or $38,300 here? I don't know. I go back and forth, and then all of a sudden you serve me up an offer that makes it look more attractive. That's not so much of an interruption as, oh, okay, cool. All right, I'm going to take advantage of this. This helps me, which is why our clients get dozens and dozens and dozens of leads per month, and those close at a high ratio. You'll find the same thing when you're submitting an incentive to somebody that's highly engaged. For them, it's less of an interruption and more of an opportunity because it was the right time to serve up that interruption.
All right. Our next question is, how can we tell what they engage with if they don't click?
How can we tell what they engage with if they don't click? I'm going to have to guess at what that means, but you mean if they? I'm assuming you're talking about they don't click on one of your ad units. What we rely on, what a good conversion platform will rely on, is assessing the behavior of that individual with several dozen algorithmic units, and then that tells us or informs the platform that there's a visitor there that perhaps needs an influence. And then we'll serve up that influence, they'll submit a lead, and then that lead comes from that source. Hopefully that answered the question, but if you want to rephrase it, happy to answer again.
Okay, our next question is, actually it's from the same person. Also, what's the difference between your platform and Outsell in market, shopping, or Pure Cars?
Wow, okay. I will tell you, I'll give you the short answer, and then I'm happy to take you under the hood on an offline session and show you the dramatic difference. You mentioned vendors that we often, take this the right way, we often unhook, right? Our dealer has one of those vendors, they see us and they go, oh, cool, I'm just going to use that. And happily. We won't name who they are so heavily, but the big difference is our proprietary algorithm, number one, the ability to identify the right person. And then the other big difference is the reason it's called MYOFFER is because it's something you own. Really, it's just, it's simply just the medium, right? That little thing that pops up is the medium. And if you think about it in the context of your website, if your website had no content, no inventory, it was just relatively a plain page, and you had an ad unit that drove somebody there, would you blame your website or would you blame the content? You'd say, okay, so it's my lack of content. So you wouldn't blame necessarily the website or AKA the medium. So it's what separates us from those products is our medium is completely controlled by you dynamically. So you control what's in it, what it says, when it says it, how many multiple offers that you can have. You can change the offer by sales, by service, by by behavior. You can exclude URLs, include URLs, exclude vehicles, include vehicles, and more specifically, getting back to the algorithm is fine-tuned specifically to your website. So we don't believe that one algorithm fits all websites, because each website has its unique signature around conversion index. Each website has its own unique type of monthly visitor count, inventory count, geography, competitors, and all of those things, and what happens on a website is unique. So not only do we fine-tune our algorithm to your site, but it automatically learns behavior specific to your site. That's how we're different.
Okay. Our next question is, with shopping behavior changing so quickly, how can we keep up? How often should we reevaluate our approach on our website?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I would encourage, if you're connected on LinkedIn, if you're connected on Facebook, and all the other automotive properties where there are social media, I would ask that question, because it's something that we should all be considering. I would tell you to do it on a monthly basis, to do it on a weekly basis. It doesn't take much to say, hey, look, let me look at this, to set a goal of, I want my overall conversion rate to be 25%. That's my goal. I want my internet department, my BDC, to go home feeling good at the end of the day that they won a lot of deals, that they didn't lose 90% of the time, that they won 25 or 30% of the time. So I'm going to set that goal. And then as you begin to, and when you get to that goal, study and look at what trends are going in the industry to see if you can increase that, obviously. But if you begin to falter or fall back from that, then it's time to say, has behavior changed? Am I using an old strategy that is no longer workable? There are many, by the way, many old strategies. And when I say old, I'm talking about 2015 and beyond, that unfortunately a lot of dealers still use today that are completely not workable. I mean, the funny thing is, they'll look at metrics in their own report. Their own data will tell them that it's not workable, but they'll do it because of fear of trying something else, right? We all do it. I'm guilty of that too, to some extent. So what we want to do is persistently see how people behave, and then make sure we're doing the things that are helping us achieve and exceed our goals, and then continue to set those new goals. In this context, we're talking about lead to sales rate and sales volume from your internet department or your BDC.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have today, Ron. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today, and everybody that's on the call. Just as Maria had asked, I did record this webinar, so if there are other people in your dealership that you feel would benefit by seeing it, please just respond to the thank you email that you get from me, and I'll forward your information over to Ron, and he'll be able to send you the recording of this webinar. Also, if there's somebody else that you feel that would benefit from any of the links or reports that Ron referenced in there, you're welcome to request those via email to us, or just request the recording and share it with them that way. If there's a topic that you'd like to see us cover, sometime in the near future, let us know. With Ron, is there anything else that you'd like to leave with our audience before we let them get back to selling today?
No, we've kept them long enough, so by all means, let's let them get back to selling.
Awesome. Well, hey, I hope you all enjoyed the presentation today, and I hope you join us again for a future AutoSuccess webinar. Have a great afternoon and great weekend. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.